Sometimes we meet someone who seems emotionally out of reach. They pull away when things get too close. They build walls when all you want to do is hold their hand through the cracks. The avoidant heart, it's not cold, it's cautious. It's not emotionless. It's afraid that love might demand too much too soon and take everything if it goes wrong. But here's the thing most people miss. Avoidants don't need fireworks to come alive again. They need a quiet spark, not a chase, not drama, not pressure, but presence. That subtle, steady warmth that doesn't demand, doesn't cling, doesn't panic when distance happens. The kind of connection that says, I'm here. I don't need to control you. I just see you. Because the truth is, avoidants are not turned off by love. They're terrified by its intensity. They've learned that love can sometimes mean loss. So they retreat, thinking safety lies in solitude. But what truly rekindles their heart is not someone breaking through their walls, but someone who doesn't make those walls necessary anymore. It's not about trying harder to get them to open up. It's about showing consistency without expectation. When someone feels emotionally safe, when they sense that your calm is not dependent on their closeness, that's when the ice begins to melt. Love becomes less of a threat and more of a refuge. That quiet spark. It's patience, it's respect, it's emotional steadiness. It's knowing when to step forward and when to stay still. It's the energy that says, I'm not here to fix you, I'm here to understand you. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind of love there is, because it doesn't demand change, it inspires it. So if you ever find yourself loving someone who keeps their heart guarded, don't try to break their walls, be the reason they don't need them. Be that quiet spark that teaches them love can be calm, safe, and still breathtaking, because sometimes the heart that runs from love isn't looking to be caught, it's waiting to feel safe enough to stop running. Avoidants often get misunderstood. People see their distance and assume it means they don't care, that they're cold, detached, or incapable of love. But in truth, avoidance is rarely about a lack of emotion. It's about the fear of it. It's the quiet panic that comes when closeness feels too risky, when vulnerability feels like standing in front of a storm with no shelter. Avoidants have usually learned, somewhere in their history, that connection comes with a cost. Maybe love once meant losing themselves. Maybe it meant being let down, ignored, or controlled. So now, instead of leaning in, they lean away. When they pull back, it's not to hurt you, it's to protect themselves. Their silence isn't rejection, it's self-preservation. They've built an emotional system designed to minimize the chance of being hurt again. The moment things feel too close, too intense, or too uncertain, they retreat into distance because that's where they feel safest. To them, distance equals control. Control equals security. But the irony is, in trying to protect their heart from pain, they end up starving it of the connection it deeply craves. You see, the avoidant doesn't want less love. They want safer love. They long for connection just like everyone else, but their nervous system is wired to see closeness as a threat. It's not logical, it's instinctive. That's why when someone expresses strong affection or emotional need, the avoidant often shuts down, not because they don't care, but because their brain translates love into danger. Love feels like pressure. Intimacy feels like losing autonomy. And the very thing they want, to be loved, becomes the thing they fear most. So they create space. They keep conversations surface level. When things start to get emotional, they distract themselves, throw themselves into work, or disappear just long enough to feel safe again. And then, when they do come back, they often feel shame or guilt for their withdrawal. It becomes a painful loop, yearning for connection, finding it, feeling overwhelmed, then retreating. Understanding this cycle changes how you see them. Instead of labeling them as cold or heartless, you begin to see their behavior as a defense mechanism, not a defect. They're not trying to punish anyone. They're trying to survive love in the only way they know how. What they really need isn't someone who chases or forces them open, but someone who can see through the silence and understand the fear behind it. Someone who stays calm instead of reacting, who listens instead of demanding when love feels calm, not chaotic, when it feels like a choice, not a threat. That's when an avoidant starts to breathe again. Their fear begins to soften, their defenses begin to lower, because finally they're not being asked to be fearless, they're being shown that it's safe to feel. And that's the beginning of something powerful, not just for them, but for anyone who learns that love doesn't have to be loud to be real. Emotional safety is the one element that truly rekindles an avoidant's heart. It's not about grand gestures, intense chemistry, or endless reassurance. It's about creating an environment where they feel safe enough to exist as they are, without pressure or judgment. For someone with avoidant tendencies, closeness can feel like danger because it threatens their sense of independence and control. They associate love with being overwhelmed, trapped, or criticized. So when someone comes along who brings calm instead of chaos, steadiness instead of emotional volatility, it begins to rewire everything they believe about love. The quiet spark that awakens an avoidant's heart isn't loud. It's subtle, consistent, and patient. It's the kind of love that doesn't chase when they need space, that doesn't panic when they retreat for air. Instead, it simply holds steady, sending the message, you're safe here. You don't need to disappear to protect yourself. That kind of energy is magnetic to someone who's used to love being unpredictable. It teaches them that connection doesn't have to cost them their peace. What emotional safety looks like for an avoidant is often misunderstood. It's not about avoiding deep conversations or never expressing needs. It's about how those things are communicated. When someone shares feelings calmly and without blame, it feels safe. When they respect boundaries and still show care, it feels safe. When love is shown in actions instead of emotional intensity, it feels safe. Over time, this stability becomes the quiet spark that softens their edges. It allows them to experience intimacy without feeling invaded. You can think of emotional safety as the opposite of pressure. Pressure makes the avoidant shut down. Safety makes them open up. When they know they won't be criticized for their quietness or punished for their distance, they start to trust again. That trust builds slowly, often quietly, but once it's there, it's unshakable. The avoidant who once withdrew begins to reach out. The one who once hid their feelings starts to share small pieces of truth. It's not sudden, it's gradual, fragile, but deeply real. This is why patience is more powerful than persuasion. You can't talk an avoidant into feeling safe. You show them through your steadiness. Every time you respond with calm instead of reaction, you're telling their nervous system this connection won't harm you. And slowly, their body starts to believe it. They begin to associate love not with anxiety, but with peace. That's the quiet spark. It's safety, consistency, and gentleness. It's not trying to fix or change them. It's simply holding space for who they are until they feel it's okay to be seen. Emotional safety doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means handling it with respect and balance. It's the difference between love that feels like a battlefield and love that feels like home. And when the avoidant finally feels that kind of home in someone's presence, their heart doesn't just rekindle. It remembers what love was always meant to feel like. When someone builds emotional walls, it's easy to think the answer is to break them down, to push harder, to prove your love, to show them you won't leave. But that's exactly what makes an avoidant heart retreat further. Their walls aren't built out of pride. They're built out of protection. Every brick represents a moment when vulnerability once led to pain, betrayal, or loss of control. So when they meet someone who respects those boundaries instead of trying to bulldoze through them, it's disarming in the most healing way. The goal isn't to break the walls. It's to make them unnecessary. For an avoidant, emotional safety is everything. They've learned that letting people in often leads to disappointment, so they cling to distance as a shield. The moment someone tries to force closeness, their alarm bells go off. They start to feel cornered, misunderstood, or suffocated. That's when they disappear. Not because they don't care, but because they can't breathe. But when someone approaches with empathy, giving them space to feel safe at their own pace, something remarkable begins to happen. The walls that once kept everyone out begin to soften, not from pressure, but from peace. It's the difference between saying, let me in, and saying, I'll be here when you're ready. One demands trust, the other earns it. When the avoidant realizes they're not being chased, analyzed, or guilted into closeness, they start to test the waters. They open up little by little, not in grand confessions, but in subtle ways, a longer text, a softer tone, an honest thought they've never shared before. Those small steps are their way of saying, I'm starting to believe you're safe. And that belief can only grow where patience lives. When you try to break someone's walls, you're still making it about your need to be let in. But when you focus on creating a calm, accepting environment, you shift the power. You show that love can exist without control, that connection doesn't have to mean intrusion. The avoidant starts to feel free, not trapped, and freedom is the key to their trust. When love feels like a choice instead of a demand, they begin to choose it willingly. This doesn't mean tolerating emotional neglect or walking on eggshells. It means recognizing that healing for an avoidant happens through safety, not confrontation. They open when they no longer need protection. When your energy says you don't have to hide, instead of you need to change, it creates space for transformation. That's when they start dismantling their own walls, brick by brick, quietly, deliberately, until one day they realize they're no longer hiding behind them. Love, when it's steady and secure, becomes the safest place for an avoidant to rest. The irony is that the more you try to force entry, the more they shut down. But the more you allow them to come forward on their own, the more they will. It's not about conquering their defenses. It's about making those defenses unnecessary by proving through your actions that love can be safe, patient, and free from fear. Patience is one of the rarest forms of love, and for someone with avoidant tendencies, it's the one that matters most. Passion often gets mistaken for connection, but intensity without stability can feel terrifying to an avoidant heart. When emotions run high, when demands for closeness come too quickly, it triggers the part of them that equates love with loss of control. To them, patience is proof of emotional maturity. It's a signal that this connection won't crumble under silence, space, or slowness when someone can stay calm. While the avoidant takes a step back, it builds trust in a way words never could. Love that rushes often burns out before it's understood. But love that moves slowly, intentionally, gives an avoidant space to breathe, to observe that affection doesn't always lead to chaos. Patience communicates safety without saying a word. It tells the avoidant, I'm not here to trap you. I'm here to understand you. That calm energy creates emotional oxygen for someone who's used to suffocating in relationships that move too fast or feel too demanding. When an avoidant pulls away, it's not always a rejection. It's often a reset, a moment for them to manage the internal overwhelm that closeness can bring. A patient partner doesn't chase or guilt them for needing space. They stay grounded and consistent, trusting that connection isn't lost, only paused. This stillness is powerful because it removes pressure. It tells the avoidant that love doesn't have to feel like a test. Over time, this consistent calm allows the avoidant to see that emotional connection doesn't have to mean loss of self. Patience also helps shift the focus from reaction to understanding. Instead of asking, why are they pulling away? The question becomes, what are they protecting themselves from? That change in perspective softens everything. It invites compassion instead of resentment. It turns frustration into empathy. For the avoidant, that shift is everything. They begin to associate closeness with kindness rather than criticism, with acceptance rather than anxiety. Being patient doesn't mean waiting endlessly or suppressing your needs. It means understanding timing and emotional pacing. It's the art of balance, knowing when to lean in and when to step back, when to speak and when silence is enough. The avoidant needs to feel that love will still be there when they return. Not smothering, but steady. Each time you choose patience over panic, you strengthen the bridge of trust they're too afraid to build themselves. This is where the quiet power of love reveals itself, not in fireworks, but in rhythm, the rhythm of consistency, calm communication, and emotional resilience. Passion may ignite the spark, but patience keeps the flame alive. For the avoidant, that steady warmth begins to feel like safety. Slowly, their guard lowers, not because they're convinced by words, but because your actions have proven that you won't punish them for being human. In that slow unfolding, love transforms from something that once terrified them into something they finally feel safe to believe in. Love, at its core, is never about control. It's about creating a space where both people can grow into their truest selves. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this distinction matters deeply. They've often experienced relationships where love came with strings attached, expectations, emotional demands, or subtle forms of control disguised as care. This taught them that closeness could mean losing autonomy, and vulnerability could lead to disappointment or rejection. So, when they sense even a hint of control, their instinct is to retreat. What truly opens their heart isn't pressure or persuasion. It's the freedom to be who they are without the fear of being changed. An avoidant heart doesn't open when you demand more. It opens when you accept what already is. When love feels unconditional, when it's not a constant negotiation for reassurance or affection, they begin to relax. They start to test the waters, revealing pieces of themselves they've long hidden. This is where love transforms from a tug of war into a dance, one that moves with understanding, not resistance. Change for them doesn't happen through confrontation. It happens through example. When they experience steady compassion, calm responses, and emotional balance, it begins to reshape what they believe love can feel like. Avoidants often expect that if they open up, they'll be met with judgment or demands. But when their vulnerability is met instead with calm acceptance, it disarms them. That moment is powerful because it interrupts their old narrative, that love is something that takes rather than gives. Over time, the avoidant starts to realize that they can exist fully within a relationship without sacrificing their independence. That realization doesn't come from someone convincing them, but from someone showing them consistently that love can be safe and liberating. This is the kind of love that inspires change naturally. It's not about trying to fix their avoidant behavior, but about creating a foundation where healing becomes inevitable. The avoidant begins to see that emotional closeness doesn't have to mean losing control. It can actually coexist with autonomy. They learn that love doesn't have to feel like surrender. It can feel like partnership. And that's where transformation begins. Not through being pushed, but through being understood. When love is given freely, without manipulation or conditions, it becomes something that awakens rather than alarms. The avoidant slowly redefines what intimacy means. They stop associating love with fear and start associating it with peace. They may not say it out loud, but deep down, they recognize that the steadiness around them has changed them, that they now respond differently, trust more deeply, and love more openly. Love, in its purest form, doesn't force change. It invites it. It doesn't rush healing. It nurtures it. And for the avoidant heart, that invitation is everything. It's the difference between running from love and finally resting in it. The moment they feel they can love without losing themselves is the moment they stop protecting their heart and start sharing it. In the end, love isn't about chasing, fixing, or convincing. It's about creating safety so real that even the most guarded heart feels brave enough to open. The quiet spark that rekindles an avoidant's heart is patience, respect, and calm presence, the kind of love that doesn't demand but inspires. When we learn to love without fear, we remind others that connection can heal instead of hurt. Thank you for listening, for choosing understanding over reaction, and for being part of the kind of love that helps even the quietest hearts learn to trust again.